raise some
Cain. You gotta raise some Cain. In the heartland where the faith runs strong, we've seen the shadows growing long. Watch those around us be deceived. Yeah, the fight is at our doors, no matter who we believe. Corruption, lawless day and night, we'll speak the truth into the light. We'll bring the battle, heed the call, watch the whole thing fall. We gotta raise some Cain, show the lies, break some chains and make things right. Feel the power, be the change, time is now. We gotta raise some Cain.
Welcome to the Raising Cain show. It's good to be back with you all. I've got a great guest on with me today, and we've had him on before, but today we're going to talk a little bit more about his story in particular, and that is Ryan Wilson. And I want to thank you all for joining. Ryan is a J6er, and that's probably what he is most known for, but I know the feeling of having that stigma kind of surrounding you, but there are still issues that are going on in his life. And I think it's important to talk about. He's a 4th generation wheat farmer, a devoted husband and a father. And that's probably the most important thing about him right there, is his connection to his family. And yet he's also a proud American, and he answered the call to stand for truth on January 6th. Like many other patriots who traveled to our nation's capital. And they didn't go there with malice in their hearts. They didn't go there with a plan to try to overthrow the government or anything, you know, that has been lied about them. And let's face it, folks, there's been nobody there was carrying a gun. Nobody was armed except for the police. And yet they were routinely treated as if they were traitors to their country. And that is the exact opposite of what the January 6ers were all about. So without further ado, please welcome with me Ryan Wilson to the show. Ryan, thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to, before we get into our conversation, because I don't want to get kind of, you know, in the middle of our conversation, then have to cut to commercial breaks. I'm going to run those now, and then we're going to come back and we're going to get into your story and what's been happening in your life since then. All right. So folks, stick with us. We will be right back after a short break.
It says, I woke up this morning and looked out the door to a country I don't recognize. They put masks on our face to hide our pain, and there's no fire in most people's eyes. And it's still true today. It's still true today that they've tried to destroy the American spirit. And in some instances, they've done a dadgum good job. But in other instances, they have lit an inferno in some people. And we right now are gathering some of those people that are on freaking fire to save this country.
Increasing expenses have caused us all a lot of pressure these days, and it's affecting even the wealthiest of people. Most have lost their sense of security, stability, and even hope for a strong financial future. the game plan of everyone in your cell phone has likely been disrupted or even hardcore stopped. And most are looking for a creative solution to regain financial momentum. Oftentimes, life's best solutions are the simplest. But first, a question. What is something most people think they should own but don't? Crypto? Fine art? Real estate? Nope. We are talking about real money. The kind kings and queens fought for and large institutions today buy in mass. We're talking about gold and silver, assets that provide confidence in tough financial situations. So the question is, do you own any? If you don't, you're not alone. Most people aren't maximizing the power of precious metals because it's just been too complicated. And even though they see advertisements about gold and silver daily, they don't really know who to trust. That is, until now. The bottom line is that buying gold and silver doesn't have to be complicated or scary. There's a simple, better way to accumulate assets and create financial peace, headache-free. And this very minute, a new community of average people are seeing above-average results to the tune of tens of millions in assets over the last few years. This system is tested, it's simple, and it's not an experiment. To date, it's helped more than 80,000 people bring hope back into their lives. It's invitation only, and right now, this new community has accepted a challenge to give away as much free gold this year as possible. Curious? Learn how to get your free gold today. Check out the next step to get the details.
Welcome back to the Raising Cain Show. Folks, like I said, this show is all about speaking the truth and about bringing up things that may be uncomfortable, but ultimately about shedding light on what happens. You know, a lot of people have heard of the story of, a lot of people know about January 6th and probably have heard many different stories of different people that are being, that have been through that. What I kind of want to focus on, though, today is about the personal impact that it has on your own family and on your loved ones. And Ryan, I know, we were talking offset and talking a little bit about that. And I think for me, there are things that you go through and you kind of like, before you experience it, you have one view of the world, you have one view of justice, you have one view of, the United States and of government and how it's supposed to function. And then after you go through an injustice like what you've been through, it completely changes your view of things, because number one, it kind of pulls the blinders off and you begin to see the reality, which is that our system, for as good as it is, and I do think it's better here than in a lot of parts of the world, it still has a lot of flaws, our justice system. And so I guess I want to start with asking you, what do you feel like, maybe a good place to start, just for those, we'll do the kind of Reader's Digest version, since I had you on before and you'd shared your story a bit, but give us like kind of a quick breakdown of your background and what happened, ultimately how long you spent in jail, what happened to you and your father. And let's start there, and then we'll get into more of kind of like what the aftermath has been.
Well, and I wheat farm in Eastern Oregon here, and about 8 years ago, I suffered a spinal cord injury that left me quadriplegic. Took me 8 years to recover to roughly 80%. I mean, I still can't feel majority of my body from the neck down, but I was getting a lot of feeling back and getting stronger. And my dad, he lives in Idaho and he's retired, and he was the one that really pushed me to want to go to January 6th. And we'd already been there a few weeks before for the Supreme Court ruling. And so I really didn't want to have to fly back over there. I was all for it. I mean, I've rooted for Trump and voted for him since the 2016 election, well, even midterms, when he was going against Ted Cruz, I was probably the only one around, at least in my wife's family, that that voted for Trump. And then, of course, they quickly switched over. But then, yeah, January 6th, we flew over there, and I was still having a lot of medical issues, especially at that time, a lot of digestive issues. I was actually only about 125 pounds, and I'm 6'1", and so I've got back up to my normal weight probably now in 8 years, and went there. Never even thought about any violence. We thought about being prepared to run into Antifa because they were at every single rally or whatever from over the 4 years that in his first term. And so we went there just, okay, well, we'll avoid it because I can't, at that point, I had no way of defending myself. My dad's 70 years old. It's like, we need to avoid it if it comes up. And there was a lot of people that went there prepared to defend themselves, but not, it was a crowd that was all for Back the Blue until about halfway through the event when they were being attacked by Capitol Police, Metro Police, Antifa, BLM, undercover FBI, you name it. And so from there, it just spiraled downhill after January 6th because within 3 weeks, my dad he was probably on FBI's most wanted a lot sooner than what we realized. We never have really looked into it, but he was notified on January 23rd, the day before my oldest son's birthday. And it was pretty bad from then on. And my dad was psychologically tortured from that point on by the FBI and the Justice Department. And that bled off onto me because it was we were like, okay, well, it's a matter of days or moments before they come and kick my door down. And and then going through those 4 years of torment, and then I fought it. My dad, they were giving my dad a lot worse charges because of where he was at in that tunnel, and I was trying to defend him, and they didn't know who I was up until they interrogated him and asked who was with him. And he said, I was with him. And then shortly after he was sentenced, they came knocking at my door, and I hired an attorney, but I fought it to the end. And, they were going to give him, we didn't know how many years at that point. It was very vague, but it would have been a death sentence for someone that's 70 years old. And for me, I was like, well, I got 2 little kids at home, and I wasn't going to plead guilty to something I knew I wasn't guilty of, but it wasn't a death sentence for me in the sense of like what my dad was. With my health issues, it was very possible. That was our biggest concern, but yeah, it was life-changing and still is. But the way I look at any justice system, I'm in the state of Oregon, which is horribly corrupt. I'll never look at anything the same again. When it comes to our medical, our Justice Department, our food industry, and I'm a farmer, it's about as corrupt as you could imagine. Fertilizer owns medicine. So everything's fake, in my opinion now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned that because, right after, of course, January 6th, we shortly there went into the COVID nightmare. I mean, COVID was around and Trump was, and I get it. I understand a lot of people are frustrated that Trump pushed for, rapid creation of, the so-called vaccines. But what Trump made very clear and, had stated very publicly was that he did not support mandates. And yet you had this illegally selected person. I'm not even going to call him our president, but you had Biden basically, who stole the election, who was in there, and I don't even think was running things. He clearly was out of his mind and didn't have, 2 brain cells to rub together. But yet somebody was making decisions and pushing for a DOJ to go after the January 6, folks and bring unprecedented charges for essentially what amounted to a protest that turned into a riot. And I would say that there's plenty and ample evidence that the riot was egged on by, people who were mixed in with the crowd that were not there supporting Trump, but were there as agent provocateurs. Regardless, the prosecution and sentences that were brought and the investigations which went on that were of a magnitude that I don't think this country had ever seen before. Some of the things that were discovered or got exposed were that, and this was by a federal judge, that there were over 280,000 illegal uses of Section 702 of FISA to spy on the American people, mostly related to January 6th. And also you had a lot of people who even some liberals and some leftists, that were protesting the George Floyd, situation. Those people also got spied on. So this is an issue that, to me, justice is an issue that is supposed to be something that both Republicans and Democrats should care about, because regardless of who is in office and who is the president, we should all seek equal justice under the law. Anything aside from that, is really, it's tyranny. And yet that is what we experienced during the 4 years of Biden. We saw more tyranny than I think I've ever seen in our country, whether it was the treatment of January 6ers and the over-the-top prosecution, pulling people, legitimate FBI agents who were on legitimate cases going after child predators. They pulled them out of the field, brought them to DC to go after J6ers. Then you had COVID, where people were being summarily fired from their jobs, from their contracting positions, from their federal positions, from hospitals, simply because they refused to allow a foreign substance that had not been tested properly to be injected into their own bodies. I'm sorry, but whatever happened to my body, my choice. That was the rallying cry of the left when it came to abortion. But then, as soon as conservatives are saying that about foreign, experimental vaccines being, and really wasn't even vaccines. It's gene therapy, being injected into their body. Like, no, I don't want that. And next thing you know, people are getting fired. We saw just this incredible period of time of tyranny in our country for the last 4 years. And it's not over, because even though Trump's in charge and even though Trump has done a lot to put the right people in place, many of those people are still in their jobs. Many of those people are still walking free. I think about my whistleblowing experience, and it's interesting. There's a lot of things coming up right now about Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation and Uranium One. All of that's coming back up again. And now there's questions about whether or not the DOJ and the FBI are going to start that investigation into that again. But, we've got a problem in our country, and that is that something has broken down to where that could even occur. We're supposed to be in the most freest country in the world, and yet we saw an abuse of power like nothing we've ever seen. How has this affected? So you mentioned about, it's kind of jaded. I'm sure like you said it's all fake. Explain that.
Well, I mean, from what I witnessed in the courtroom for my trial, and then even before that, where the FBI was very shady. I mean, they're probably the most. I mean, it's a lot of competition for what's honorable institutions in DC. That's a high bar they got set there for, or low bar for unhonorable institutions. But in the courtroom, I mean, they weren't looking for evidence. They weren't looking for justice. They were just going off of the narrative that they'd been pushing from the day of January 6th. And from what I witnessed there, and then even before that, when it came to the medical industry, when I was in the hospital from being paralyzed, they don't try to fix you. They want to keep you as a customer as long as they can. And in a sense, that's kind of how the justice system is. They want to put you in jail because they profit off of that. And that's how the DC jail is. It's like they have a quota. When you see people in there, we were just filling a quota, and it was like they found a pocket of gold. Oh, look we can put thousands of people in jail for years. We're going to keep these spots filled for a long time now. And that was kind of exposed through some of Joe Biden's pardons, where he pardoned a judge that was doing pay to play, and that judge was putting kids, they weren't even 18. They're putting them in juvenile detention. And then, of course, those kids learn crime. I mean, I saw that in the DC jail, where it's like, I can see how people go on to doing crime, because now you lose all respect for the justice system. You lose all respect for police. And so, I mean, it's kind of been my attitude, and I've been fighting it. But a cop will come up behind me driving down the road, and I used to be paranoid about it. Now I'm like, hey, just go ahead and pull me over. I'm going to probably give you an earful. So I'm glad they haven't pulled me over, because it's not going to help me out any. But I've lost there. And there's great cops. There's good people out there that really want to do good.
Sure.
And my attorney was one of them. Charlie Haskell there in DC, he's a genuine guy. And everyone I've talked to that said that's few and far between. And then the COVID thing, I forgot all about this until just the other day. But when my dad and I were flying back, when we got on the flight to come back, nobody was wearing a mask, and you didn't have to have seats in between you. It was a packed flight, because we had to fly back to LA and then back to Boise. And they said, oh, there's no more masks needed. And that was going into California, no masks. And that same day they changed the PCR testing. And so it was just, I was like, oh yeah, this just confirms it, that I knew it was all BS. Yeah. And so it's like, what do I question everything now, everything.
Hey, I want to take a moment real quick here just to give a shout out to a good friend of mine that is in the comments and has been watching the show, who lives in your neck of the woods. He lives in Eastern Oregon, and that's Curtis Martin. I don't know if you know him or not, but great man.
We're at in Eastern Oregon.
Curtis, I can't remember the name of the town where you live, but just type it into the chat, and I'll reference it. But I'll connect you guys after the show. But
okay, I'm sure I'll know it. Yeah,
he's a rancher up there, and just great guy, really great guy. So, but sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I wanted to just make a comment about that.
No, but I'm glad I remembered that. I just remember we got on the airplane to fly home, and they said, "Oh, their masks aren't required," and we're like, "What?" Yeah. And I mean, I wasn't wearing them there anyways, and even if the stewardess got mad, I was one of the few. Of course, on the way back, we were wearing them because we didn't want people seeing our faces. Morning Joe Scarborough, he was rampant on the news at first thing the next morning. And so it was pretty weird getting that, like, oh yeah, this is just all political.
Yeah. I want to bring up some interesting cases here. I was just kind of doing a little bit of analysis on J6. For people that don't know the scale and the charges that were brought, you're talking over 1,575 people were charged in connection with January 6th Capitol riot by January 20th, 2025. So that's you're talking 1,500 people, over 1,500 people, with 1,270 of them being convicted. The charges ranged from misdemeanors, illegal parading, trespassing, to felonies, which would be, you know, like assaulting officers, seditious conspiracy, which the Supreme Court later said no. But nonetheless, you had people who were charged all across the board. And I guarantee you, those that were charged with misdemeanors, it's likely because they took a plea bargain because they didn't want, you know, they were told, you know, we're gonna sentence you to 20 years in prison for seditious conspiracy unless you take a plea bargain. And for a lot of people, you know, that there was no choice to make there. They, you know, yeah, sure, I'll take a misdemeanor over a felony and not have to go to prison. Very few people had the principle to say, no, I'm going to fight this all the way. And most of those people who did say no and fought it all the way ended up having to serve hard time. Seriously, we have a serious problem in our country's justice system when that kind of thing can go on. If it's acceptable for the FBI, or for really, this is at this point, it's the Department of Justice, if it was acceptable to say, we're going to sentence you to 20 years, but if you plea, then we'll let you go without prison time. And we'll make you just have probation, or we'll make you serve 4 months and then you get out. Think about that for a minute. How in the world, if you really truly believe that somebody is guilty of seditious conspiracy and that they should go to jail for 20 years, how in the world could you justify giving them only 4 months and released on probation? It doesn't make any sense, other than the system is rigged entirely to incarcerate or to convict people regardless of whether they committed a crime or not. That is the problem that I see. And yet you have, and that's at the federal level. And yet at the same time, we've got states like New York where you can, you know, rape somebody, murder somebody, and you got cashless bail. You get out and you know, it's like we're living in a world where, you know, it's either one extreme or the other. There's no balance. There's no middle of the road. And that plays itself out in every category of life, right? Our justice system, it plays us out in our politics. You know, we've become much more polarized. And I think you're right. It is a joke. It is it's sickening to look at that and see what has happened in this country, and to know that the people who have done these things, who abused their power, who broke the public trust, that they're still walking around, and in many cases they still got jobs in the federal government. That bothers me. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, and there was just I saw a news thing that came out here the other day where they fired a few more prosecutors at the Department of Justice. They wouldn't release the names, and then demoted a few. But I mean, judges, prosecutors, the judge in my case, McFadden, yeah, he's a total tool. And I believe it was you that mentioned it last time, that he that because he was once a former cop, he should have recused himself. And
Absolutely.
Yeah, the prosecutors in my case, I mean, they were obviously, the judge was a lapdog for them. And the ones that ended up taking it over at the end, because the ones that had been there longer had kind of moved on to something else, because I think they were reading the tea leaves, and they saw that it was good for them to get out of there before the new administration took over. And that was in October. And I remember running into the prosecutor that originally been handling my case, or my attorneys ran into her in the hallway. And of course, she looked at me kind of with embarrassment, I guess. At least that's how it looked. And, but yeah, I believe they should serve jail time. They completely, I mean, it's not called justice what that was. I mean, that was just, we have no room to badmouth places like Russia and their justice system, because ours was the same, if not worse.
That's a very good point. How can we be a city on a hill? How can we be a shining light of freedom and justice, right? Equal justice for all, with that level of hypocrisy in our system? It
Well, and
really is a
even
problem.
another thing that also came out, and Rockney Earls, one of the other J6ers I was in the DC jail with, he sent me an article about a FOIA request that had finally gotten released about how Merrick Garland was purposely contacting the prison, or his goons were making sure that the prisons were putting us on like a terrorist like watch system at the prisons and in the jail, which I can confirm that because I didn't get mail for like the first 2 months, or at least the first month. And I found out from one of the inmates in there who was like kind of on a more serious crime list. And he said, "Oh, it's because you're at like a high scale watch list for like extreme like terrorist criminals, and so they don't give you your mail, and it takes a while for them to get it okayed before it can be released to you." But Merrick Garland, they found out he was giving orders to treat us worse, and then there was security guards from the prisons and the jail that actually came out as whistleblowers and were
Good on them.
speaking out against it. And those guys had death threats against them by inmates and other guards for for coming forward and saying something. And so they were treated the same way as us, not quite the same, but their lives were railroaded, kind of like the FBI whistleblowers, because they said, "Hey, how you're treating these guys is not right. These are just like middle-class Americans. Some of them never been in trouble before. Some of them not even a speeding ticket, and they go to prison for a misdemeanor." And it's the first time in history that people have gone to prison for misdemeanors.
I want to speak to that for a minute here. Check this out, folks. There's some really interesting cases out there that I think give an example of the ridiculousness of this. All right. A 2025, you had a teen facing a 30-year sentence. This is crazy. For firebombing, Tesla is a property crime, right? You've got, and yet you've got people like January 6th defendant Enrique Tarrio, right, who received 22 years for seditious conspiracy, despite not even being physically present at the Capitol. What gives, right? You had, in the same respect, in 2023, a BLM protester was sentenced to 10 years for burning a man alive. Okay. With prosecutors requesting leniency. In contrast, January 6th defendant Dominic Pizzola, who broke a Capitol window, also received 10 years. So apparently, breaking a Capitol window is equivalent to burning a man alive. That's how ridiculous our justice system is. That's crazy. You've got a whole lot of other examples here that I could go through, and I could spend all night going through. But one that I want to bring up to you, because I have the evidence right here in hand. You mentioned about being denied mail. All right, I've got a whole stack of mail here.
And religious services, like not once. I was in there for 100 days, and I was looking at 4 to 6 years in prison because I was released the day I was supposed to be, or I was released the day after I was supposed to be, I was released the day I was supposed to be sentenced, and I was looking at 4 to 6 years were my guidelines. And I was never got a single religious service the entire time I was there.
I was given an envelope filled with mail by a friend of mine in West Virginia named Virginia Zetti. She's a wonderful woman. She's an older woman, Christian. She sent to the January 6ers things like, these Bible tracts. Okay. All right. If somebody's in prison, right, not a bad thing for them to be able to get Bible tracts. Scripture readings. Okay. She had some things like, scripture and some personal notes and words of encouragement that she wrote to people. Okay. I've got all this here, and this was all stuff that was meant for Shane Jenkins. Okay. Came back. This is what it came back with. Okay. Came back with this form. All right. Denying, it says, a notice of disposition of mail from the DC Department of Corrections mailroom. And it says return to sender. And then you go down here and there's a check mark next to why it was retained. Contains other contraband or unknown substances contains fake money. That was the reason. You know what they were talking about? This. Okay? It's got Bible verses on the back. Clearly, this is not fake money. This is a Bible tract. Okay? That's what it is. Everybody knows that there's no such thing as a $1 trillion bill. I mean, give me a freaking break. This is not counterfeit money. But they did this. They used whatever means they could justify to deny United States citizens their mail. Now, do you know what the law states, what the Geneva Convention Code of conduct for the war? When we have prisoners of war, okay, enemy combatants that we have found and we've rounded up after a war. All right, think about Nazis, okay, or Japanese war criminals. Did you know that it's illegal to deny them their mail? It's illegal to deny them religious services. That's according to the Geneva Convention. We are a party to that. We signed a party to that. Yet they deny mail of prisoners that are American citizens. And in this case, American citizens actually were exercising their right of free speech and their right of assembly. That's what I would argue was going on January 6th. Was there some violence, some things getting out of hand? Absolutely. Should there have been prosecutions brought for people who, committed violence? Certainly. I don't have a problem with that. But it should have been handled like any other case of where somebody, punched a cop, or where any other case where somebody trespassed. Okay. Not 20 years, and certainly not 22 years for not even being there. I mean, it's insane what happened. I keep bringing these things up, and I keep having J6ers on my show, because until I see justice done, it will never be enough, because it means it can happen again. And that justice, like you mentioned, it needs to happen with judges. It should happen with prosecutors. It should happen with law enforcement officers that abused their power. And I am all for law enforcement. I have been my entire life. But I see a real problem when there is not justice done to those who would abuse their authority. And the Attorney General at that time is one of the number one people, in my opinion, who should be prosecuted. Because what he did strikes directly against the Constitution of the United States. He's guilty of so many violations of our Constitution. How that man is able to, number one, have his, he should be disbarred. He should never be able to work in any kind of, form of justice department at all, or any kind of law, or do anything having to do with the law. But I would argue he should be prosecuted for deprivation of rights under color of law, being that he was the one who ordered a lot of that. And the buck should stop with him.
Well,
and if it turns out that Biden ordered him to do that, then Biden should be. But then again, with the auto pen, who knows? Maybe it was Neera Tanden, who was the one apparently in control of Biden's auto pen. So it disgusts me that we are where we are right now, and I am praying for our current leadership within the Justice Department and the FBI, and I am praying that God will help them to root out all of the corruption, because until it is, I don't think there can be trust in those departments. I think there's a real problem with the American people that still have a lot of doubts about whether or not these institutions can be trusted. And there has to be public trust. Otherwise, these institutions should not exist. I want to ask and kind of shift things a little bit to the aftermath, because you were in prison. Your dad was in prison.
Well, I never did go to prison, but I was in the DC jail there for almost 4 months. But
I consider that prison. But you're right.
Yeah, it was. From what I've heard, it's worse than prison.
Yeah, I would agree.
But could I speak on the stuff about the police real quick from what you mentioned?
Yeah.
So like it's complicated, but I know this for a fact that they actually shorted the amount of Capitol Police they wanted there that day also, because when we got an Uber ride to DC, I think it was the night before, or maybe it was the day. No, it would have been the night before. And to our hotel room, the Uber driver said, yeah, my brother-in-law, he's a Capitol Police officer, and they gave him the day off tomorrow. And he's like, that seemed kind of weird to me. You think they'd want full staff there. So they not only denied security in every aspect that Trump was wanting it there, but they even gave Capitol Police the day off because they wanted everybody to go in there. They knew there was going to be agitators, and then they knew, I mean, you can see videos where there was cops shooting flashbangs at us. And so I know there was people there, and Jake Lang is one of them. He was one that was there. He's never voted for Trump once, and a lot of people don't know that. He admitted to me in the jail. You had provocateurs, which I believe Jake Lang was a provocateur.
I've heard that too from very good sources.
Yep, and he's heavy on drugs now. I mean, he's grifted off the whole thing from day one, which makes me so angry. But there was people like him. Yeah, they should go to jail, but he's not a J6er. He was never a Trump supporter. But the problem was there was so much chaos, and it was set up that way from the get-go. I see what you're saying, where people should go to be prosecuted for going against police, but I guarantee you, not a single person there who was a Trump supporter would have ever committed violence if it wasn't for what the deep state, in my opinion, they wanted that to happen. There was people in our government and in the Capitol Police who were probably higher up, captains or whatever they are. They hated us. They were shooting flashbangs and rubber bullets into peaceful groups of people. And I remember witnessing that. Like when I first got there, people were just singing songs, having a good time and enjoying the view, even though it wasn't going the way we wanted it to. There was no intentions of any violence. And then it just started turning slowly. There was people in the crowd pushing and shoving and spraying mace into the crowd that weren't police. They were just Antifa and FBI that were in the crowd. And so it's a unique point in our history where, there was people that were defending themselves and getting angry with cops because of how they were being treated by them. And so it's like, it's kind of a gray area. But
yeah, I watched a video that was very telling to me, and if I could find it, I'll try to pull it up. But it was so just surreal because you had all these guys that were standing down. They were basically they were down kind of like in the center, not near the tunnels, but kind of like right near the center, and they were holding up American flags, and they had thin blue line flags, okay, which are basically meaning I support my my police. And they started having flashbangs thrown at them and rubber bullets shot at them. And this is all on video. And you see these guys, all of a sudden they're like, what the hell? And they throw down, the thin blue line flag and start stepping on it because they're pissed off. They're defending these very people who are attacking them. Mm-hmm. And that was very, to me, it was a very kind of aha moment, of what happened, because I do think that there was a very strong sense of betrayal by a lot of people, because most of those people there, guaranteed, if you're a Trump supporter, you support the police. That's that is who you are, because conservatives support the police. So the majority of people there supported the police.
One of my closest friends is a former sheriff in our area. He supported me through the whole thing, and we'd been friends for over a decade. And so if I had anything with the police, I sure wouldn't be friends with him. But yeah, it's the narrative they painted on us. And
Yeah.
of course, this is coming from the liberals who wanted to defund the police. And all of a sudden after January 6th, oh, look at what they did to the police. I mean, it just like what we deal with now with all the flags. Like the liberals are going bankrupt because they don't know what flag to buy next to what movement to support that's against Trump. It's just, you can't keep up.
You know, on that note of Jake Lane, it's interesting. I've not wanted to kind of get into, trying to figure out who's who and all of that. I've stayed away from that. But I do need to bring him up because so Eddie Smith, who's a great guy, he's the guy that runs the Patriots. He runs Patriots Prayer, which is the platform that I'm on. I think had talked with him, and then he talked to some other people, and he found out some very interesting things. Like one, this guy went from prison to prison, and yet he had a cell phone. He had the same cell phone.
He also had a laptop.
Yeah, that doesn't happen to a typical prisoner. Certainly not.
He was able to avoid all these times you hear Jake say that because I supported him up until 3 months ago, and I started finding out stuff and hearing things for myself. And I'll send you a Twitter live chat that he did where he was saying racist things, horrible things about supporters, and he grifted off of people, and he was paying not only attorneys with donation money, I mean hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, to keep him in solitary confinement, but move him from jail to jail to avoid court because he has a criminal history that his dad has helped suppress for years, because I believe all of his files are sealed. But he's done some pretty bad things, and he's still trying to grift off people. And when some of us have tried to bring it up amongst, I guess, some of the bigger supporters, advocates, they don't want to believe it because they've
already given the guy attention and let him on their show. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, he goes on Newsmax and stuff, and I'm like, you guys have no idea what you're getting into. But he admitted to me in jail that he'd never once voted for Trump, and I think he just did it out of excitement when we were getting out. That was like an hour before he was released, because he got released the day before me, and then I ended up having to go back to my cell and stay another night. But he admitted to me, he's like, I've never voted for Trump. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, no. He's like, I never voted for him 2016 or 2020. I'm like, well, then why were you there? And then he quickly changed the subject. He's like, oh, I probably shouldn't have admitted that. And then other guys have said, yeah, there's a good chance he was Antifa, because when he got first put into the protective custody with the other J6ers, like within the first week, he thought he was in there with other Antifa people, and then he realized they put him in there with Trump supporters, and all of a sudden he quickly changed his tune. I mean, it's a rabbit hole that you wouldn't believe the rabbit hole you go down, and he grifted millions of dollars from people. And the sooner people can disavow him and separate him from J6ers, the better. I mean, sadly, he was kind of the spear of the moment, the movement, which he made a lot of noise and probably helped us in a lot of ways, but he's a disgusting human being. And I'll send you some stuff when this is over. It's pretty bad. I mean, and the way he talked about people who took a plea deal is extremely wrong. But all the time he spent in solitary confinement, he requested that. He says it like, oh, they treated me so bad. No, he was requesting that.
Yeah. There's something else that happened after January 6th to our country that was shocking to me as somebody who worked in Washington, D.C. For over a decade. And I want to bring up this picture because this was basically a scene from the Capitol after or I think it was maybe the night of the inauguration or right after the inauguration of Biden. But let me bring this to the screen here. What is wrong with this picture? You've got,
Totalitarianism.
that's right. When people want to call Trump a king, or they want to call him a fascist, and yet Trump never had Constantino wire and armed soldiers protecting the Capitol. There's something wrong with that. Like, number one, if you're truly been elected by the people, why do you need that kind of level of military security? And I saw this, it lasted for months, because every day I would go down to DC and I had to see the Constantino wire, the razor wire at the top of these tall fences, and, scary, scary guards, carrying assault weapons, right? That's the other thing that cracks me up.
Well, they project. They like to project.
That, absolutely. Absolutely. This was a terrible time again in our country, and I hope, and I want to remind people of it, because this should never ever happen again. Unfortunately, I think that if we don't change things, it may happen again. I wish I could say it wouldn't, but I really do think that not enough has changed to prevent that. When you have a communist, an avowed communist in New York City right now, who may end up being the one to get elected up there, who supports Sharia law, and that's who people of New York on the Democrat side nominated. It's just crazy. Let's talk about your family for a minute, because there's a part of this that I don't think people think about. And this is, in all fairness, anybody that goes to prison, whether they're a J6er or whether they're a drug dealer, if they got family, if they got kids, they got a wife or whatever, they're going to be without them. And they're, going to lose their job or whatever. There's a lot of things a lot of impacts financially that people who go to jail and prison have. Now, for those who justly are put in prison, I don't have a lot of sympathy for them. Although, just because somebody goes to prison, they're innocent child. They, even if the person that went to prison is guilty of a crime, oftentimes, the families are left destitute. And there was a Christian organization a while back, I remember, that I had gotten involved with years ago. And I think it was called Angel Tree, but they basically raise money to get gifts for, the children of prisoners for Christmas. And I think that's an honorable thing. But there was a real impact to your kids and to your wife and to your family. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the person it hit first in my family was my dad. And to this day, well, for probably the last 3 months now, he's not talking to me. He's separated from his girlfriend, because my mom and dad have been separated. They're still good friends, but they've been separated for about, at least a little over a decade now. But he, psychologically, they broke him before he ever went to prison. And that goes to Merrick Garland's thing, is he was purposely putting J6ers in the most dangerous parts of the jail, like the DC jail or the prison. He spent 30 months in Yazoo, Mississippi, federal low, when he requested to be in a prison in Oregon, where he'd be closer to family. He spent 30 months with a pedophile as a cellmate. And he said it was bad. And he doesn't talk much about it, but that was one thing he always mentioned to me. He had to be in a cell with a pedophile. And this my dad's a 70-year-old guy with 2 grandchildren. It took everything to not want to just strangle that guy because of the sick things he's seen while he was in there. And Merrick Garland was purposely doing that. When we were in the jail, he purposely put us in the most dangerous part of the DC jail, where there was a stabbing or a fight nearly every day, if not once a week. And And then, yeah, for my kids, they saw what happened to my dad. And then I had to kind of break it to my oldest. My youngest was 3. He turned 3 while I was in jail. And yeah, they're the ones that hurt the most, in my opinion. I could psychologically handle it. I leaned on my faith hard while I was in jail, and I got a lot of help from advocates, from the other J6ers that I was in there with. And advocates, huge. My wife was a rock through the whole thing. I don't know how she did it, because she lost her mom literally the same week I was indicted by the federal government, and she died from a COVID vaccine. And so it was hitting us at both barrels. And then, yeah, my youngest one still today, this is the first time they were at church camp for this last week. And that's the first time he's been away from me this long, this whole time. And he really liked doing the Zoom calls to see me every night. But for the first 3 months, if I wasn't in sight or he didn't see me, he would have a complete meltdown. And my oldest, who's 11 now, I got home a day before he turned 11. He heard a few stories that I was telling to the local Republican Party, and he started crying in the middle of it, because he didn't. I don't mind telling some stuff in front of him, because he does need to know, but he still has separation issues, and yeah, it's really tough on him. It was really hard on my mom, because I'm the youngest of 2, and so seeing what was happening to me, not on top of me being paralyzed years ago, and then them treating me like I was a domestic terrorist. I mean, it was extremely stressful for my mom, my father-in-law, who he had to finish farming while we were in the middle of seeding our crop when I got thrown in jail. And financially we spent over $130,000 on attorneys, which you're getting off pretty cheap in DC if you're only spending $130,000 on attorneys.
Tell me about it. I had a whistleblowing. As a whistleblower, I spent $200,000 on attorneys, and thankfully I had a very generous benefactor that covered my legal bills.
Yeah, I'm still paying my dad back. I mean, he didn't want to talk about finances when he was in jail, but when he got out, I was like, I had to borrow some money, because we're going to be paying that back for a while, because we didn't have all that. We were able to cover about half of it by ourselves, but we don't just have cash like that floating around. And and that's why a lot of people took a plea, because they couldn't fight it. And all the court-appointed attorneys were garbage. They were trying to push people into taking pleas, and that's another reason why people did. But no, it's forever changed my kids, and there's some good parts about it, because they know that we have one of the most corrupt governments in the history of the world. At least under Biden it was. It's slowly turning around, and Trump's doing a great job. And that's where I get upset when people knee jerk at some of the stuff he's doing, like taking out the nuclear facility in Iran. But it's like, this guy doesn't want war. He's like, so many people want to just disavow him or turn on him. It's like, I won't. I mean, that guy saved my life and brought me back to my family. I mean, and he didn't have to. It was not a good political move for him to bail us out of jail and prison.
He could have been a typical politician and just taken the easy path and done, and did a poll, or something, internal poll to see how it was going to. I think he's a man of principle. I don't agree with everything Trump does, but I agree, I agree with probably the majority of it. And I would say, I have no doubt that he acts out of his own belief, whether, in other words, he's doing what he believes is right. I don't think that he is somebody that just, he's a true leader. He doesn't just do what other people tell him to do.
Yeah, and he's still fighting the wolves in there. He still has people whispering in his ear that are giving him bad information, even though he's came into this term a lot smarter.
Much better position, yeah.
but you're going up against the most fake, corrupt. You thought a used car salesman was bad. Go in and try to, deal with some of these politicians that have been in there for generations, not just their whole life, but generations.
Yeah. Now, you had somebody that helped you while you were in, and we talked about him the last time I had you on, but what's going on with Dennis, and tell us a little bit about, what his circumstances are right now.
So Dennis, he's how old is he? He's about my age, 44 years old, a Russian immigrant who came to America. He was opening businesses where he has electronics and health devices, and he was in Hong Kong, and then that government was trying to kind of take over his businesses, moved to Sarasota, Florida with his wife and now 4 children, and was doing fine for a few years. And then the FBI was basically going after any Russian citizen. They were trying to paint Russians as these horrible people, and hockey teams, whatever that was related to Russia. His wife's Ukrainian. Well, they tried saying that he was trying to sell a $380 electronic device to Russia that they could possibly use for drones that would attack Ukraine. And so they're trying to get him for espionage. And Matthew Graves, who was the head prosecuting attorney for DC under Biden, or U.S. attorney under Biden, and he basically what he had written up about Dennis is almost mirrors what they had about J6ers. And so when I first read that, I was like, oh, it's total garbage. And we looked through all of his stuff, but he was in the DC jail with us there, and we quickly realized like he was railroaded the same as us. It's just so the prosecutors can put a notch on their belt and then use them for leverage against the Russian government. Oh, we got a guy, we'll trade you for one of our guys.
Yeah.
And he sank about $250,000 into an attorney, and not getting much out of it because they still have prosecuting attorneys there that pretty much own the federal judges and are just doing the same thing. Oh, he could be a flight risk. You can't let him go. So he's now been in that DC jail for over 9 months. And they finally moved him to the CTF unit, which is the treatment center, which is better. But it's now that there's no J6ers there, it's gone back to its same old awful, rotten ways where there was no.
Yeah, nobody was paying attention.
Yeah. And so I've tried leaning some of the advocates and stuff to, at least writing them letters, and some of them have, and reaching out to them. And even a few J6ers have tried to go visit them, but they still won't let J6ers go even visit now. Like, I think it's like a 3-year limit that you can go into that jail if you're an inmate or whatever. And so even if you were pardoned, they don't care. And so Dennis is still there. He just had a court date on the 26th. He wants to hire an attorney that's offered help, which is one of Trump's, it's through his firm, Peter Tipkin. And, but they're not going to do it for free. It's like another $200,000 if they go to trial. And then it's like $50,000 to push for a pardon. And they've went and looked at his case, and they're just like, you shouldn't even be sitting in this jail. And which was, they're literally treating him the same as they treated us. But that's where I say they've cleaned up a lot in the DOJ, but it's pretty rotten from the core. So you're not going to change it even in this term. It'll take a decade or more to really make a difference, which I don't see happening. But yeah, Dennis is still rotting away in there, and he's innocent.
Is he in the DC jail?
Yeah. And they've tried offering him plea deals, and he's turned them down every time. He's like, I want to go to trial, and they're just prolonging it. They're torturing him.
How long has he been in there without a trial?
9 months.
That's ridiculous.
And
the Constitution guarantees you a right to a speedy trial. I think if they can't bring charges after a couple of months, then you should be free.
With mine, they they gave me, so they had 8 charges against me. 3 of them were felony. 2 of them were for throwing a water bottle. The other one was for having my hand on a PVC pipe that I lunged forward, trying to protect my dad. That it wasn't anything I brought there, but because I turned down their plea deal twice, they turned 3 of those misdemeanors against me into felonies. And so I didn't know till I got out that they had 6 felonies I was facing. So I could have easily gotten more than 4 to 6 years. But if you don't play their game, they just tighten the screws. And that's what they're trying to do to him. They've denied him any medical treatment. He has a kidney stone that's causing him to pee blood. Nope, they won't give him anything. And there's not the wave of J6 advocates that helped me out when I had my spinal cord injury in there. And so he calls me every so often, and I talk to him on the GTL chat. And that guy is mentally far stronger than I could ever been. I mean, and he's got 4 children at home that his wife's raising on her own. And she's Ukrainian, so it goes against their whole narrative that he was trying to.
Right. Why would he be helping the Russian government? Yeah.
For a $380 part.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
He's just another notch on the belt.
Do you know if is there any advocacy going toward to Trump to try to resolve his circumstances?
There's a guy that works for Peter Tipkin that's went and visited with Dennis, and his name's George. I can't remember his last name, but he works in that law firm that's out of Florida there. Miami Beach, I think is where, I'm not sure, but they want $50,000 to push for a pardon and, go through all that with Ed Martin. It's just, and so we've been trying, I'm planning on setting up a Give, Send, Go, because he's like, if I keep dipping into my assets, he's like, my family's going to be on the street. And he's like, I can't do that. And so now because he's put so much money into this attorney he has right now, he doesn't have the money to get the attorneys that are actually going to do something.
What I don't understand, if he hasn't had a trial, how has he not been offered bail? That's something guaranteed to us in the Constitution.
Well, there was a guy that was in the DC jail when we were there. He'd been in that DC jail for 4 years. He wasn't a J6er. He'd been in there for 4 years.
Without a trial?
Without a trial.
Wow.
And so then they finally offered him a plea deal, and he took the plea deal. And it was murder charges. But he was fighting it the same way. He's like, I didn't murder anybody. He's like, that's why I've been in here 4 years. I'm not taking their plea. And finally, after 4 years, he took the plea. I mean, one of the most obese and unhealthy guys I'd ever seen. And I can't imagine how he looked 4 years ago, because they called him Big Ock, but he was always nice as could be to me. He handled all their food because he'd been in there so long. It's like he had a job. And yeah, he'd been in there for 4 years. And
wow,
they don't care.
Wow. So with your circumstances and your situation with your family, I mean, obviously you guys are still trying to recover. Do you have a Give, Send, Go? Is there a place where people can support you, where they can, give a gift?
Yeah. We did set one up here a while ago because, I'd torn MCL. I was still having back issues. I'm not going to say it over this, but my wife had a really, really bad health scare that almost killed her about 3 months ago now. And so it put us in a financial pinch where Daniel Goodwin, who is also a J6er, and he writes for the Gateway Pundit every once in a while. Him and Jen Baker, who also does stuff for the Gateway Pundit, they talked me into doing it, and I'm glad I did, because it's gave us some breathing room. But yeah, we'd set up a Give, Send, Go that's just under, I think it's under Wilson Family, and then I have a Twitter account that's just J6_Wilson, but it's I don't really go on it too much, but I think it's Forever Wilson is the name, but the handle is at J6_Wilson. But it's
is the one for the Wilson family one, is that Give, Send, Go /Wilson Fund?
Probably. it should be a picture of my wife and I on that
Yep.
when I first got out of the jail.
Yeah, let me pull that up real quick so people can see it here, and that way they can go and
And
contribute.
that's
that the
one thing
one?
I want to say on. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Is this the correct one?
Yes, that's it. That's when I first got out of jail, and I've actually got back to my normal weight. I'm normally 180 pounds, and I was about 140 something, 150 pounds in that picture. I was looking pretty gaunt and pale, and of course I had to shave my beard because my wife really didn't want me having the beard.
Yeah, that's funny. I am
But
gonna put something up real quick here, folks. Listen, checked out this website. I'm gonna put it on the banner going across the bottom of the screen there. But please check that out. GiveSendGo.com/Wilson Fund.
this
There,
also goes to my dad, and I don't like asking for anything. We're doing okay now, but this goes to my dad too. So
yeah, which loaned you some money to, and you know, and helping to pay that back, which I'm sure,
yeah,
that's
'cause
important.
yeah, and he was perfectly fine with me doing it, but it's just ever since he's not the same guy he used to be. I mean, he was once
Yeah.
a 6'4", 240-pound, logger, and the life of the party kind of a guy, friends with everybody. Everyone loved him, and yeah, he's a recluse now. He doesn't talk to anybody. He doesn't talk to me, and it's tough. And I tell him I love him all the time and send him a text. And I lost my dog of 16 years, who my dad had him as a pup, and that's who I got him from 16 years ago. My dog Bo, and that was the last time he talked to me, and it was just because I lost Bo and I'd let him know that he'd passed away. And my dad's a dog lover like me, so that was the only time he responded to me, was over that.
Yeah, that's crazy. For Denis Postovoy, you said that you set up a Give Send Go, and he had a part in kind of saving your life when you were in the jail, right?
He did. I haven't got it set up for him yet, but I'll get that sent to you as soon as I do. But yeah, I fell out of my bunk in the jail there when they had it about 90 degrees in there. I was in a cell with Rockney Earls, who's another J6er, and I was on the top bunk. He's someone that he was a U.S. Green Beret or Army Green Beret, and has injuries from being in the military. And he's 64 years old. I wasn't gonna make him get on the top bunk, so I was on the top bunk. And even though I had a bottom bunk profile, for a while I slept on the floor, but with the mice and the cockroaches, you get kind of tired of that. And so I slept on the top bunk, and one morning or middle of the night, I was getting down to go pee, because I pee a lot with my neurological injuries, and I slipped, because there's no steps to get up and down off the bunks, and you're in an 8x12 cell for 20 hours a day, and it's 90 degrees, and I slipped coming down, trying to step down off the sink and then the toilet, and I fell and hit my back against the opposing wall, and I started having numbness in my legs, worse than what they ever were, and I was getting where I was having a hard time walking. And the next time, well, even before we were let out of our cells, we were locked in for about a week solid. We didn't get out of our cells for a week solid, 24 hours a day, 90-degree temperatures. But then when Dennis finally was let out, he came over to my cell and reached in through the slot and was helping massage my back to relax the muscles, where it was from a previous herniated disc that was also affecting my previous spinal cord injury. And I was denied being out for finishing my medical treatment at the trial, or after the trial. And so I never did fully heal from that. So yeah, Dennis, he was a huge part in keeping me sustained until the J6 advocates raised enough hell to have me sent to the hospital that stopped the numbness from, it was up to my chest, where I was getting where I was having a hard time standing up. And Dennis he's an extremely smart guy that knows a lot about health and physical therapy. And yeah, we got some weird looks from some of the other inmates. When we finally got out, he laid down his blanket on the floor in the middle of like the foyer, and was manipulating muscles in my back to calm down the nerves that were going crazy.
Sure.
And no, I'm not going to rest until that guy's out. And I promise him when he gets out, and he will, I'm going to be there to see him when he gets out. I don't care if I have to go back to the hellhole DC. I'll be there to help him and embrace him when he gets out, because he's a genuine guy. And Rock Murals and Michael Bradley, who are also J6ers, can vouch for that.
Yeah.
And they know he's innocent.
Oh, I think that speaks volumes. We've been, we're about 15 minutes past the hour, and I want to kind of wrap things up a little bit here. But, there's so much that we could talk about on this subject. And I do think that we got to keep talking about it until there's resolution, until there's justice. But, tell me, or not me, tell those that are watching, we got about 2,000 people live watching right now. What is it that you want to say to them? What is it you want them to take away from our conversation?
Don't trust the media. I mean,
Mhm.
and I mean, be thankful that we have an administration right now that is being as transparent as possible. And I truly believe that. And be aware of what's coming, because there's a lot of stuff coming. This is no time to rest. When we were in the DC jail, like you talked about what's going on in New York, the Muslim movement is one of the biggest threats to our country, not just corrupt politicians and justice system. The amount of Muslims that were being converted to, the amount of people that were being converted to Muslim in the jail was astonishing. I mean, more than half the people in that jail that were DC citizens were joining the Nation of Islam. And if we don't wake up, we're going to be the next London, and that is coming. But you have to get involved in your elections from the ground up. School board, local elections. I mean, my wife wanted me to take a little break, and I am, but I've already been asked to be a part of the local Republican Party here. But call your local people out on their BS. Be involved. We can't sit silent and watch this happen again, because the left is organizing just like they did before the 2020 election. They're organizing. The media wants to say they're in disarray. No, they're not. They're organizing, and they're coming with vengeance.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Trump can't do it all on his own.
No. He needs our help. Look, this is our country. We got to take ownership. We have to step up and do our part. It's why I ran for Congress. I didn't win, but you know what? It exposed me to a whole lot of people across my state, and exposed me to a lot of the issues that I wasn't even aware that were going on. And it connected me in with the Republican Party in a way that I had not ever been connected with. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to run. And I don't know if I'll run again, but for right now, at least, and if I feel the Lord calling me to, I will. But for right now, doing this podcast and having the ability to get the word out there on the different issues that are going on, and being able to be a voice, crying in the wilderness about the stuff that's going on in our country and that has gone on and that needs to change. I feel content, being able to do that. So I want to thank you again for joining the show tonight. Hang on after the show, because I want to connect with you and get some contacts and stuff and share some with you.
Okay.
But folks, listen, if you can, even if it's a small donation, please give. Please do so. And it is, when I was going through what I was going through as a whistleblower, if it had not been for, I think it was like $8,000 that people had raised, which basically covered our bills so that I didn't lose my house and everything while we were going through that, and I was looking for a new job. If it hadn't have been for, the generosity of others, I probably would have been in a lot worse of a situation. So I want to thank those of you that are generous, and that those of you that can give, and please do consider giving and helping, because it is tough to come out of a situation like that. And it won't last forever, but you can certainly help to make things, help to make the Wilson family whole. So I appreciate every one of you that are watching the show right now. I thank everyone that is, a regular and that comes on and listens to, me and the guests that I have on the show. And I appreciate all of you. And so I always like to close in prayer. I think that you mentioned about how it was your faith that got you through, that you leaned heavily on your faith to get you through, that tough time. And I'm sure you guys are still, leaning on your faith to get through the challenges ahead. But I believe firmly that, we do our part, but ultimately we need God's help. And so I'm going to go ahead and close this in prayer. Heavenly Father, I thank you, Lord, for Ryan and his courage to be bold and to speak out, and even for him honoring his word and speaking out on behalf of Denis and Postovoy at a time when it might not be popular to support a Russian citizen. But Lord, I thank you that he is a man of honor, and that you have encouraged him to do the right thing, to speak out for this man who's innocent. I pray, Lord, for Denis and for his wife and family, and I pray, God, that you would make them whole and that you would restore Denis to his family. Pray, Lord, that you would protect them, and especially while he is incarcerated. I pray you protect him while he's in jail. Lord, I pray for justice. I pray that you would break the demonic spirit that has infiltrated our justice system, to where those that speak the truth are treated badly, and those that lie are praised. Those that will bear false witness. I know, Lord, that's an abomination to you. And I pray, God, that you would expose those who have borne false witness. I pray, Lord, those that speak the truth, that you would lift them up and that you would bring vindication. And Lord, I pray that you would empty the prisons in America of those who are innocent. And God, those that are not innocent, but those who are truly there for crimes that they've committed, I pray you would reform them, Lord, that you would move on their hearts and that they would find you while they're in prison. Lord, I pray for the Wilson family, that you would restore to them everything and all the years that the locusts have eaten, Lord, that you would bring everything back. And I pray especially, Lord, for Ryan's father. And I pray, God, that you would move upon him, that you would touch his heart, and that you would heal him, Lord, from the trauma that he experienced while he was in prison. Lord, there are still so many that are forgotten, and many whose stories maybe don't have any notoriety, and nobody knows about the injustices that are occurring to them. For those, Lord, I lift up to you, and I pray, God, that you would bring them hope. For Lord, it is you that told us and told us through your words that when we do unto the least of people, Lord, we've done it unto you, including visiting those that are in prison. And God, I pray that you would remind Christians around the country that they need to be involved, not just in their communities, but also in their prison ministries as well, Lord. I pray, God, if there were more Christians that were involved in prison ministry, then these types of abuses and things that have happened in prison, they wouldn't be able to continue to happen, because there would be outsiders seeing what is going on. And I pray, God, that you would raise up Americans to speak out against the injustices that are happening even in our prison systems. Lord, we thank you. I thank you, Lord, for everybody that's on watching the show right now. God, I pray your blessing over them. I pray that you would speak to them in whatever way it is that you want to speak to them, God. And I pray that you would bless the show, and that you would bless everything we're trying to do here, God, and shedding light on these issues. And I just pray your blessing over everyone today involved in the show. In Jesus' name, amen. Ryan, thank you so much for joining the show, and I appreciate you and appreciate your message and the consistency of your message and what you have been speaking out against. And I just wish you well. Stay with us on the show. I'm going to go ahead and end the show now, but I'll talk to you after after
Well,
the show ends.
I appreciate you too, Nate, for being one of the few voices that spoke out in your position as a whistleblower too. I mean, you're one of us because you stood up for what you thought was wrong and was wrong. So, I mean, I appreciate you for giving us a voice, because there's not a lot of people out there that want to listen to us.
Well, I think at least there's 2,100 people tonight that wanted to listen. So I'm glad that all of you that are listening are with us tonight, and I thank you for joining. I know there are a lot of Americans that still care about this issue, and even though, yeah, maybe some people want to just move on, and I understand, I get it. You know, even me as a whistleblower, I kind of get tired of that label, and sometimes I just want to, like, you know what, let's just try to move on in my life. But the fact is that as long as whistleblowers can be treated the way that I was treated, that prevents other whistleblowers from having the courage to come forward. And so it's important that these things get brought to light. It's important that the Trump administration deal with those who abuse their power to, you know, go after people like myself, you know, who have blown the whistle and, you know, at great risk to themselves. So I think that I think we have to continue to be bold and speak out and speak the truth. And I think as long as we can do that respectfully and do that with understanding, I don't ever, like, I know that, and I'm glad that you brought it up too first, is that, you know, there are a lot of good cops out there. There are a lot of good FBI agents. There are good CIA agents, believe it or not. I know a few of them. And the fact is there's a lot of people that join those professions because they love their country, because they love law and order. They want to see justice. And believe me, I've talked to many of them, and they're just as sick as you and I over the types of injustices that they see. But the problem is it's a system, and the system is broken in many ways. And it takes very strong leadership, and it takes a lot of time. It didn't get broken overnight. It took time to become corrupt, and it takes time to uncorrupt the system and to build trust back into the system with the American people. And that's an important part of it, because without
A lot harder to rebuild after being destroyed.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, with that, folks, remember to stay vigilant and stay humble. And don't forget about those who are not in situations, you know, of where peace is in their life. You know, some of us it gets easy to just kind of forget about the troubles that others are facing, especially when it's convenient to just kind of, you know, live our lives and do our job or whatever. And remember that saying, you know, there's a famous Japanese saying that says that the nail that sticks out gets hammered. Well, you know, one might argue, well, that's perfect justification right there to never be bold or say anything or do anything that, you know, that makes you stick out. But if you don't have people willing to stand up and speak out, then you're going to be ruled by tyrants, because they will abuse and use and abuse their power. And so it requires those that are righteous to stand up and speak out when they see things that are wrong that are going on in our nation. So with that, I just want to encourage all of you. God bless you. God bless America. And don't be afraid to be bold. Just make sure that you got Jesus watching your back when you do. With that, good night.
Raise some Cain. You gotta raise some Cain. In the heartland where the faith runs strong, we've seen the shadows growing long. Watch those around us be deceived. Yeah, the fight is at our doors, no matter who we believe. Corruption, lawless, day and night, we'll speak the truth into the light. We'll bring the battle, heed the call, watch the whole thing fall. We gotta raise some Cain, show the lies, break some chains and make things right. Feel the power, be the change, time is now. We gotta raise some Cain.